Today I'm going to come at you with two new reverse lunge variations. So what I'm going to do is just very quickly show you a basic reverse lunge, really quickly explain why you might use a reverse lunge, show you a deficit variation, and then I'm going to show you two variations I'm really enjoying right now, which are a little bit more glutes and hamstrings dominant, and are really great for you if you are not looking to grow your quads so much. So they're more of a lunge variation that avoids kind of growing your quads too much, and has a little bit more bias on glutes and a little bit on hamstrings. So especially if you're like NPC bikini, IFBB bikini, you don't want to be gaining too much size on your quads, these are good options for you as compared to your standard reverse lunge or forward lunge variation. So normal variation. We can hold dumbbells, kettlebells, whatever you want to. I'm sure most of you already know what reverse lunge looks like, but you can have it like this, like a contralateral. So we reverse lunge like this. You can have it in a goblet position here. Or obviously you can hold one either side. Obviously I don't have two dumbbells, so I'm not going to show you that. Quickly, a deficit variation. You just need some kind of step box. I'm just going to use the corner of this belt squat just to show you. So again, we've got different holding positions. So all we're going to do is just step back. Deficit is for deficit. So that knee drops below the line of the floor or the box or the step that we're stood on, and then we come back on, okay? So it's here, deficit, nice and deep, and all we achieve by going into that deficit is we're taking our hips through a greater range of motion, which loads our glutes a little bit more as they stretch, okay? So the reason why you might do a reverse lunge as opposed to a forward lunge, just to give you a forward lunge demo, forward lunge, right, is that a forward lunge, you're using, you're kind of putting on the brakes as you go forwards into that lunge variation. So as you come forwards, just imagine what my quads are doing, okay? So my knees flexing, so my knee extensors have to put on the brakes to decelerate me down before I drive myself back, okay? So we're putting a little bit more load, a little bit more stress through our knees by going in that forward lunge position. I would argue they're a little bit more quadriceps dominant than a reverse lunge variation. Also, we're kind of using our glutes to put on the brakes as well, okay? So our glutes are more acting to decelerate my load as I'm coming down. Versus as I'm in a reverse lunge, one, I can keep my shin a little bit more vertical, so I've got less knee load. My quads aren't decelerating so much, or they're not kind of putting on the brakes so much as I'm coming forwards. And also my hamstrings are kicking in to decelerate me as I'm coming back to come back forwards. So my hamstrings activating helps kind of stabilize my knee, stabilize everything around that area to make it a little bit more knee friendly as well. What tends to happen with a reverse lunge as well is that you can handle a little bit more load more safely, you're more stable. All around, I would suggest it's a better movement for you if you're looking to grow your glutes and build your hamstrings as opposed to working your quads. Also works better if you're going to use something like a deficit, which obviously allows you to get more hip range of motion. So that's why you would use a reverse lunge. Let's check out those two reverse lunge variations that might be new for you, might not, but I'm really liking them right now, and I think you should give them a go. Number one, now this is probably my favorite that I'm going to show you, is a supported deficit reverse lunge. So deficit, as we've spoken about just a second ago, we've got some kind of elevation off the floor. It allows me to take my knee further down where the floor would otherwise stop me. I'm using 2 plates here, but you adjust it however you kind of want to, depending on the depth that you're able to attain. The support here comes from a Smith machine. Now, you don't have to use a Smith machine. You can use a barbell set in a rack. You can use a TRX if you want to, that can work, like a suspension trainer, some rings, that can work. But I do really like a Smith machine. I'm going to show you without the load first, just to kind of explain some things, and then I'll show you with the load. Now, there are 2 ways we can do this. So either way, we're going to have one hand on the bar. Now, by having our hand on the bar, what it allows us to do is have an element of stability to things. So as opposed to a reverse lunge like this, where I'm a little bit more unstable, I'm able to grab hold, lock myself in, and create an element of stability, which allows me to get a little bit more output from my glutes, a little bit more kind of targeted force coming from my glutes, but then also does allow me to lift more weight because I'm no longer limited by, imagine I'm a little bit more like a circus clown, I'm unbalanced, I'm all over the place, okay? So it kind of gives a little bit of confidence as well at the same time. So from a hypertrophy standpoint, really works well. That's not to say there's no use for like unsupported, that's great, but I do like this as quite kind of more like a meat and potatoes exercise. I do like this more towards the front end of a workout to really load you in that single leg kind of range of motion with that hip, okay? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start here, we're gonna have a load by our side, we're gonna step into that deficit and then step back on. When I mentioned there are two variations of this, we've got variation 1 where we can allow our knee to travel a little bit more forwards over our toes, okay? So yes, we're getting a little bit more quadriceps dominance from that, but I like the depth that we get with that one. Variation number 2, we can actually take our foot a little bit further in front and almost have our knee behind our ankle, okay? Or try to get our knee behind our ankle. So we can step back like this and then on. Now, although that's a little bit less knee dominant, I would argue we're not working our glutes quite so much. However, we are kicking in our hamstrings more. So you've got to really kind of question what you want out of things. If you're really trying to stay away from your quads growing, then you want to keep that knee kind of back behind your ankle, all right, in that second variation here. But if you're not too concerned about your quads and you're just trying to grow your glutes as well, then that is absolutely fine, okay? Because naturally it's going to get a little bit more quads involvement, but also I would argue that we're getting a little bit more range of motion, a little bit more depth through those glutes. Hamstrings obviously kick in a little bit as well. So we can load it with that one dumbbell just here, or as I said, step forwards, shin is a little bit more back than that first variation. Okay, so those are your deficit supported reverse lunges. That's probably my favorite option, but I'm going to show you another option of reverse lunges that I like as well if you're trying to grow your glutes without trying to grow your quads too much. Check these ones out. These are called anterior lunges. Sometimes I call them hip dominant reverse lunges. Full credit to Coach Nick Tominello, who I first learned these from. He's the OG of exercise selection, in my opinion. So, anterior lunges. What we're going to do here, instead of our standard reverse lunge, obviously I'm using 2 dumbbells, okay? Instead of going here, and just notice what my knees are doing, notice the angle of my shins, okay, my tibia. Instead, we're going to make it a little bit more deadlifty, okay? So we're going to step back and hinge our hips, okay? So we'll step back and hinge and come back through, okay? So it's a little bit more single deadlift, kind of with a little bit of support, versus your standard reverse lunge, which is like this. So notice what my shin is doing in this variation. It's remaining relatively vertical. My knees are staying back behind my toes, and I'm taking my hip through a greater range of motion, my knees through a reduced range of motion versus my standard reverse lunge. So I'm getting a little bit more of a hip bias versus knee bias, so a little bit more glutes and hamstrings bias versus quadriceps bias in this variation versus my standard reverse lunge, which obviously means I can grow my glutes, my hamstrings, without my quads kind of growing too much at the same time. So if you're someone who struggles with your thighs getting thicker, but your glutes still looking like a pancake, then that is one option you can use, as well as obviously the previous variation, that supported deficit reverse lunge, to grow your glutes without working your hamstrings. Hopefully you enjoyed what I've taken you through today. As always, make sure you like this video, because liking the video helps to support my page and helps more people see these videos, helps them get better results in the gym. And remember to subscribe to my channel so you do not miss any future YouTube videos. Take care, guys, and I will see you next week.